Give me a smile and then I'm wrapped up in your magic. There's music all around me, crazy music, music that keeps calling me so very close to you. Turns me your slave. Come and do with me in a little bit.
Okay guys, that was the intro for this video today. Today we are going to talk about and reviewing these speakers here. The Technics SB7000A. I have had these for about 3.5 months, I think it is. I have started cleaning them up. The only thing left now is the top, both tops on each speaker, of course. They need some either to be cleaned or I have to change the speaker grill fabric. Everything else has more or less been cleaned and done. I have some dust cap domes on each speaker that I have to pull out on the 15-inch woofer. So I have been over the at least last 2 months been running some tests on these speakers, and with different amps. I have been using that amp over there, which is a Radio Shack MPA 250A. I have been using the Carver that is below it, which is a PXM 450. I have also used an Onkyo AV receiver on it. I have also used Marantz 2220 receiver, and I have used Sansui 5050 receiver, and a couple of other amplifiers and receivers have I used on these speakers. Like I said, these are the Technics SB7000A. They are from the 70s. This pair has some nicks and they show sign of use and age, but they are in fairly good condition. I mean, all the drivers are okay, but they have some nicks like this, you know, but that's okay. And I probably have to change this up because it's pretty dirty and it has a hole right there. So minor things. But how do they stack up in sound? And that's the big thing here. I mean, the cosmetic things can always be done, but how do they play? How do they sound? Are they a good investment, and how do they compare to other speakers? Well, I have had these, like I said, on testing for a long time, and normally I don't test speakers over 2 months. I maybe test speakers over a week or 2 weeks. I have run these speakers up against the Klipsch KG4. I have run them up against the Bose 601 Series 2. I have run them up against some smaller Technics that I have over here. I have also run them up against the Advents, the large Advents, as we call OLA over here. And a couple of other pair of speakers that I've had that I sold. And how do they stack up against all these other pairs? Of course, these Technics can't really in many ways be like compared directly to the speakers that I mentioned. But in many ways they can. But let's face it, the differences between these and the other ones that I mentioned is, of course, these Technics SB7000As are bigger speakers, bigger box volume, bigger drivers, and a little bit different configuration. So of course the differences are there. But sound and tonal characteristics, how are they compared to the other speakers? And let me just say it right off the bat, they are probably so much better than the other ones that I mentioned. The Klipsch KG4 have nothing to stack up against the Technics. The Bose 601 Series 2 are far behind on sound quality. Can't even be compared to these. The Advents are okay in sound quality. I like the Advent, but they lack bottom, they lack low end. The same with the Klipsch KG4, and of course the Bose lacks a lot. The Technics SB7000A are way more complete speaker than any of the other ones. And I want to say that the smaller Technics over there are probably closer in sound to these than any of the other ones that I have here that I just mentioned. So, but in sound quality, probably the closest ones that comes up in sound quality are the Altec speakers that I have down here on the bottom. Those are probably the ones that are kind of like up there with these in sound quality, even though that the Altec also doesn't have enough in the bottom to compare to these, because that's a woofer size thing. These has a 15-inch woofer in each, so they're way more bottom, way more information in the bottom. So when that's out of the way, let's see how good are these Technics SB7000A. Well, let me just put it like this. Do I recommend these speakers? Absolutely, I do recommend them. These were released back in the mid to late 70s. And I tell you, when they came out, they must have been a force to reckon with for many speaker manufacturers back then. If this was the sound quality they released back in the 70s, they probably knocked a few brands off their feet, and they probably blew a few socks off someone too, because these sound really good. I like the sound in these Technics SB7000A, and you have a mid-range controller and a high range. I didn't use it. I had it on one, where it's the kind of like normal position on these speakers. I did test it, and I went to like 2 and 3 on them, and there is a difference. Brighter, more in your face, more like they came further out. But I was feeling it when I had them on one, that was enough. It lasted at least in this room. And this room is fairly large for a listening room, because right now I'm standing. When I was listening to them, I did it in different length away, and the distance I did it in different distances from the speaker. And right now I'm probably a good 16 feet away, maybe. Yeah, 15, 16 feet away am I now. And and this room is pretty wide too. I think the total size of this room is 20 feet wide and 24 feet long. I think that's the size of this room. So I used these two receivers as well. You saw me on different tests. The Technics sound really good with both of these receivers. I noticed one thing with these speakers. It doesn't take a lot of amplifier power to get a really good sound out of these. So these must have a pretty good efficiency. You know what, I'm going to be so honest and say, I have not looked up any specifications on these speakers at all. Normally, the first thing I do when it comes to speakers is to look up specifications. For some reason, I did not do it on these. I just hooked them up after I cleaned them a little bit, and I'll start listening. The only thing that I think is missing on it, I think they came with a little felt from they were new, but I think they have been taken off because I see glue things there. So I think there was a little felt here to avoid the reflections from the cabinet. So that I probably have to put back on. So I didn't look up any specification. The only thing that I did, I was Googling what year and when they came out, and I saw something about late 70s. So I don't know the efficiency on these speakers. I don't know anything about the specifications on these speakers. So I can't really tell you anything about that. But I think they are pretty efficient. Because I mean, I have a 30 watt and a 20 watt receiver that I hooked up to them. And I could play really, really loud and with a good result, and the receivers did not stress at all. And when I hooked up this Radio Shack power amplifier here, which brags about being 250 watts, which is not, it's more like a two channel amplifier with 100 watt in each channel, and which I think is overrated as well. I think RMS is probably more like a 60 watt per channel if you ask me. Even that one drives these speakers fairly well. This Carver here, which is 125 watt in 8 ohm and 225 in 4 ohm, really makes these come alive and dance and just be very vibrant and very detailed and clear. And you can feel that Carver amplifier, that is pretty powerful compared to the other ones that I used, really has a lot of headroom on these speakers, which tells me that these speakers are really efficient. So it wouldn't surprise me if these Technics speakers are somewhere, without looking up, I think maybe they are somewhere in the range of 93 to 98 dB with 1 watt per 1 meter range. That's my guess. And that would be fairly efficient, even for Japanese speakers from the 70s. Because back then there wasn't many speaker manufacturers that really had that high of an efficiency. I mean, there were some, but Vega was one of them. And then you had a few others, but I think these must be at least in the mid 90s somewhere. How would I describe the sound? Well, you heard them a little bit when I started this video, and that was with a cassette. From this then on. So that was a cassette playing. I have tested it with a cassette, I tested it with the DVD, and I have tested the digital files, FLAC. I even did a YouTube video test from my phone via the amplifier, and even the best files that I could find on YouTube even sounded good, even though that's lower quality. So I want to say that the bass, if I'm going to compare the bass to some of the other speakers that I have used in the past, are they at Vega level when it comes to bass, which Vega is very famous for? No, they're not in the Vega league when it comes to bass and low-end reproduction, but they're not far away. They give a good low end, and they give a fair bass reproduction, but they're not Vega class in the bass. But what they do have is a fairly good, clear, standout, good mid. The mid-range on this is playing really good. The transition from the woofer, between the woofer and the mid, is really good. It's very seamless. So it's very nice to listen to. Now the tweeter, I'm very surprised, because a lot of old tweeters can seem to sound a little bit harsh. These are not harsh at all. And another thing, when I talked about the transition between the woofer and the mid being seamless and good, I tell you, the transition between the mid and the tweeter is exceptional. It's really good. So whoever made the crossover in these speakers hit the nail on the head, because how the tweeter and the mid interact with each other in the speaker is really, really good. So you had 3 points, 3 crossover points, and 3 drivers that interact with each other in a really nice way, in a very seamless way. So you don't feel that you're missing something. You don't feel that the speaker is dipping in any frequency area. A lot of speakers, you can hear that, oh yeah, that's a good bass, but you feel that the mid-range, maybe in the lower mid-range, is missing something because there's a gap between the mid-range and the bass. When you feel the bass is overpowering the mid-range, and you feel that the tweeter and the top end of the frequency is overpowering the mid-range, that's when you get the dip. Here, there's no audible dips that I could hear. It's very seamless. It's very one character sound, and to me, that's very, very positive. And it would probably on a chart, if you measured it, I believe that these speakers would be fairly flat. Sorry, not flat as in bad flat, but it would have a very cohesive frequency response curve. So it would probably be within 3 dB of each other per octave, which is, from the days when I did car audio judging, is where they want it to be for high-end sound quality. You don't want it to be 0, because you want a little bit dynamic in the sound. If you have 0, it can become very boring right away, because you want a little bit of dip here and there, but not dips, but you want a little bit tweaking in the sound here and there. But if you are within 3 dB per octave, which most people will call audible flatness, and it's good. The frequency curve is very nice and linear. I think these speakers, I have not seen any frequency curve on these. There are some things on the top here, but I don't think those are correct. But I think these would surprise a lot of audiophiles. And I don't think these speakers at all would be ashamed to own by anyone. And I believe that these speakers could take a battle up against some of the newer stuff on the market today and not feel bad about the way they're playing at all. Could they maybe benefit from, after all these years, from a crossover upgrade with newer capacitors and stuff like that? Of course. But as long as they're working, as long as they're playing fine and the way they're doing it right now, I don't see a point of doing that. Down the road, maybe upgrading to film capacitors or something like that would enhance the sound a little bit. But the sound in these are so good already. If there's one pair of speakers over the last, let's say, 5 years that has surprised me the most, these would be it. And I've listened to a lot of JBLs. I've been listening to a lot of Altex. I've been listening to a lot of Klipsch. I've been listening to a lot of Dali, and a lot of different other types of speakers, which in the beforehand had raised my expectation pretty high. So when I went into listening to those speakers, I had already high expectations. And some of them were like, okay, they kind of like, yeah, they're close to what I have been told. They're close to what I expected. But then again, you pay an arm and a leg for them. When I got these, I had heard and I had seen a few videos on YouTube about these speakers, but there wasn't much hype about them and there wasn't much bragging about them. It was like, okay, it's good speakers. But when I have now had them on test and I have used them for a couple of months, I have to say the first time I heard them, I was really surprised. I was positively surprised about the quality of these speakers. And the more I use them and the more I play them, the more they grow on me. And the more I get to like them for what they are. And what they are is old speakers with a little bit of a funky design, I have to say. Because they are kind of like, they have this metal and on the front, and they have metal handles, and they have a little box on top of another box, and the layout of the speaker connectors are on top, and they have one grill here, and they have a detachable grill on top that is not fastened in any way. It just rests on top of the handles. So design wise, it can look a little funky, but listening to them, and they just blow you away. And I trust me on this. If you listen to them once, you go like, huh, this sounds good. Trust me, you will say that. And then you listen to them again, and then you start listening to them over and over, and you listen to different kinds of music, and you find sweet spots for different types of music. And I have used a lot of different music on these, and I have played all my favorites. I have played Queen, I played Pink Floyd, I played Dire Straits, I played a lot of heavy and hard rock and metal, some country. I have played all my favorite bands, all my favorite songs, and at all my favorite levels. I have played low and carefully, because sometimes I do that because of my migraines. So then I'll just like to have the music on soft and low in the background. So I have done that to see how they work as a background speaker, and they work perfectly. And sometimes when my headaches and my migraines are not that bad, I have played a little bit louder, and they are just as good then. And then of course I have days where my migraines are under control, and where I feel that I can take the risk of raising the sound, and I play louder, and they don't budge an inch, and they don't complain. They take it, even with 125 watts. I would be interested to see how they would deal with a higher end amplifier, because none of the amplifiers or the receivers that I have used can really be considered to be high end or hi-fi or anything like that. I mean, I've used some pro audio amplifiers, I've used some receivers. So yes, I have power, I've had enough power, but it would be nice to hear these speakers here with maybe some kind of an amplifier a la maybe Classe, Electrocompagnie, Mark and Levinson, Krell, Macintosh, Acurus, Mondial, Hafler, something in that range. Have a higher, maybe Parasound, something like that. Have an amplifier that was higher end and more pure hi-fi, and see how they then react and how they play. I bet you that could improve the sound even more on these speakers. So I am positively and utterly surprised by these Technics SB7000A. So I give it 1, and I give it 2 thumbs up. These are definitely speakers you should check out, and if you can find them in good condition, I would say don't even back off, buy them. I was lucky enough to get these for what I would consider an okay deal. Where do I value these? Well, from the way they play, and from what I have seen, I would say if you have to pay even 5, 6, 700 bucks for these, I would say that would be well spent money. I would not think that you could find much else for the same money. A lot of these Klipsch speakers that sells online for 250, 300, 400 bucks will not touch these speakers. So paying 5, 6, 7, 800 bucks for these, you know what? I would say it's worth it. If you can get them cheaper, fine, good. You make a good deal. But these are absolutely worth paying a little bit more for. When you see what you have to pay for, let's say, Klipsch Hersey, Klipsch KG4, and stuff like that. Yeah, look at those prices. These are better than Klipsch Hersey. These are 5 times better speaker than any Klipsch Hersey. Doesn't matter if it's series 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, or 20, or God knows how many they have made. These are way better, and they will demand more money. And I would not be afraid to pay more for these. I would spend more money on these than I would do on any vintage Klipsch, beside, like, of course, the corner horns and Bell and La Scala and stuff like that. But I have heard those others that I mentioned, La Scala and stuff. Yeah, they sound better, but these have more low end. So it's more like a complete speaker. But then again, you pay 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 bucks for those other speakers. So anywhere between $500 and $800, I would say, is a good price on these and well worth it. So if you want to spend money on these, do it instead of Hersey and KG4 or any of the other Klipsch speakers that you pay 250, 300, 350, 400, 500 bucks for. You get a better pair of speakers here in the Technics than you do in Klipsch. The only drawback and the only problem with the Technics maybe, compared to Klipsch and other speakers, there is maybe a bigger selection of spare drivers if something happens with Klipsch or other speakers. There might be a problem finding original drivers for these because these are not as usual as the other ones. So if something happens here, I mean, the woofer you can probably get re-foam kit for. If the foam goes out or something like that, you can get dust dome caps and stuff like that. But if the tweeter goes out on this one, you probably have to look a little bit longer and harder to find a tweeter than what you would have to do for a Klipsch. So that's the only drawback of owning a pair of speakers like this. But the final verdict, would I recommend these? Absolutely. So if you find a pair of these for sale, go for it. Don't even think twice. They are well worth 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 bucks. And if you have to pay 700 bucks, do it. You will not regret it. I have tested a lot of speakers in all kinds of price categories, all the way from 50 bucks up to $50,000 in my 30 years in speaker business and audio business. And I tell you, these are well worth up to 800 bucks. You might say, well, the market doesn't show that. Who cares? If you want a pair of speakers that sounds good, these are well worth 800 bucks at the most. If you can get them for 3 or 4 or 5 or 600 bucks, you're doing a great deal. Because there are other speakers out there that you have to pay more for that sound way worse. So go out and get yourself a pair of Technics SB-7000A.